Scientists say Japan's immune to industrialized and ultra-processed food trends driving up obesity rates worldwide. Excess weight is a growing concern here, too. Yet the population is remarkably resilient in the face of that global trend. Why? A key factor my mom and many experts point to is the Japanese school lunch. School lunches are free, scratch-made, and balanced. But that isn't all, says Michiko Tomioka, a Japanese nutritionist based in New Jersey. She says starting in elementary school, lunchtime itself is treated like a class in nutrition. Kids serve each other food, are tasked with cleanup, and are encouraged to eat everything they're given. Having a standardized lunchtime ritual establishes a common cultural understanding about what normal, healthy eating looks like, she says. And that's how it also becomes a habit that endures. Yuki Noguchi, NPR News, Tokyo.
This is NPR News.
Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama is blocking military nominations, leaving vacancies in some of the nation's highest military offices. And military spouses say they're hurting too.
It is ignorant to think that just by affecting these individuals, you're not affecting their families.
How Tuberville's blockade is affecting military families on All Things Considered from NPR News. All Things Considered this afternoon at 4 o'clock until 6:30 here on 91.7 WVXU. President Trump will be arraigned this afternoon at 4 o'clock. We'll have special coverage for you during All Things Considered. It's 71 degrees now in Cincinnati at 8:30.
Support comes from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine and UC Physicians. From innovative treatments for brain tumors to the most complex spinal and brain surgeries, their physician scientists strive to bring the highest level neurosurgical care to Cincinnati. Learn more at med.uc.edu/indispensable.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Dave Mattingly. Former President Donald Trump is expected to plead not guilty today when he appears in a federal courtroom in Washington. Trump is scheduled to be arraigned on a 4-count felony indictment stemming from what prosecutors allege were his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election leading up to the January 6th attack at the U.S. Capitol. The charges were announced this week by Special Counsel Jack Smith. Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi chaired the House Select Committee that investigated Trump and the events of January 6th in the last Congress.
I'm convinced that a jury of his peers looking at the evidence will make a decision, and that decision over the long term will make us stronger as a nation.
Thompson was speaking to NPR's Morning Edition. A judge in Pennsylvania is expected to formally impose a death sentence on Robert Bowers today. The truck driver was convicted of killing 11 worshipers at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. Yesterday, jurors recommended Bowers be executed. Lee Stein lost her father in the shooting. She says the death penalty serves justice.
Even though nothing will bring my dad back, I feel like a weight has been lifted and I can breathe a sigh of relief.
That attack occurred in 2018. This is NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. It's 8:32, 71 degrees in Cincinnati. This is 91.7 WVXU. I'm Marianne Selesnik. With demolition derbies and livestock auctions, county fairs across Ohio are pulling in crowds this weekend. Butler, Claremont, Montgomery, and Warren counties all had their fairs last month. Preble County closes Saturday. Hamilton County's fair opens August 10th. In Southeast Ohio, some of those crowds aren't just supporting local agriculture, they're fighting local hunger. The Ohio Newsroom's Erin Gottsacker reports.
At the Perry County Fairgrounds, about an hour east of Columbus, nearly 200 pigs were sold at this year's hog auction. About a third of them were donated to local food pantries. Tony Fiore is the president of the Community Foundation for Perry County, which is leading the Fill the Freezer initiative.
The donations that we received this year, we think that we're going to actually have year-round sausage provided for our food pantries.
Pantries in Southeast Ohio, like the rest of the state, are seeing increased demand after pandemic-era benefits ended earlier this year. They say meats, like pork, are some of the hardest foods to come by. Hocking, Vinton, and Gallia counties have all launched similar initiatives in the past few years. For the Ohio Newsroom, I'm Erin Gottsacker.
Work on a long-closed section of the Mary Eagles Highway begins next week. The highway was shut down in 2019 because of a landslide. The Kentucky Transportation Cabinet says work will be between Tower Hill Road and Kentucky 445. Contractors will shore up the hillside, rebuild the shoulders, add culverts and guardrails. Weather permitting, the project starts next Wednesday and should be complete by next June. Fiona's little brother Fritz turns 1 today. To celebrate, the hippo will get more than his share of watermelon at the Cincinnati Zoo's birthday party, according to the zoo's Angela Hapke.
He was born on World Watermelon Day, which is so fitting because our hippos love watermelon. So we're doing a 1 in a melon theme, and so we're going to have different photo ops with watermelon props, and different animals at the zoo are going to get animal enrichment with watermelon themes. Of course, the hippos are going to get watermelons, and Fritz will get a birthday cake as well.
The festivities are today from 10 until 3. It's anybody's guess what Fritz weighs these days. Zoo employees are placing bets ahead of today's official weigh-in. It was the Cubs over the Reds last night, 16-6. Mostly to partly cloudy today. The high temperature 81. Clear, warm tonight down to 67. 71 degrees now.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Indeed, a hiring platform designed to streamline the hiring process. Indeed works to help businesses attract, interview, and hire candidates in one place. More at Indeed.com/NPR. And from BritBox, with the new season of Silent Witness. Every dead body tells a story in this long-running forensic crime drama starring Amelia Fox. New season streaming at BritBox.com/NPR.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm E. Martinez in Culver City, California.
And I'm Layla Folden in Washington, D.C. July was the hottest month ever recorded on planet Earth.
Now, those record high temperatures are fueled by climate change, and scientists say it's only going to get hotter. That is, unless leaders of the world's most powerful countries step up to curb emissions, but for the most part, they're not. And in the U.S., a new NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll shows that it's largely because one political party is turning away from the climate crisis.
Joining us now to talk about that and more in this latest survey is NPR senior political editor and correspondent Domenico Montanaro. Hi, Domenico.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get to climate change and the party we're talking about, Republicans. What did Republicans we talked to say about the climate crisis?
Well, we asked people a few questions about climate change, including one that I think is really key for why so little is getting done in Congress to address the problem, and that's exploring this tension between climate change and the economy. Now, climate change is costing the country and the world billions of dollars in disaster funding and preparation, but Republican messaging to their base has been about the potential short-term cost of climate change. So we asked if priority should be given to climate change, even at the risk of slowing the economy, or to the economy, even if it means ignoring climate change. The results really were eye-opening, I thought. Overall, a majority of people said climate change should be the priority, including a majority of independents. But here's the rub. 3/4 of Republicans said the opposite. In fact, as the days have gotten hotter, Republicans have only increased in feeling this way, up 13 points in the last 5 years.
Wow.
A lot of that could be attributed to the way former President Trump speaks about the climate crisis, the leader of the Republican Party over the last several years. The science is settled, the evidence is clear, but he's downplayed its effects, and we've seen that base that loves him so much seem to really lap up everything he's had to say.
But, I mean, like you said, the science is settled. Don't most people see climate change as a major threat, not just to the country, but to the world we live in?
Yeah, I mean, most people do, but only a small minority of Republicans do, and you need Republicans and Democrats to be able to agree on something to get something done. 70% of Republicans in our poll said that climate change is either just a minor threat or no threat at all. Overall, majorities of respondents also said climate change is having a serious impact and having at least some effect on their communities now. But 80% of Republicans said climate change will in the future only have a minor impact, or in their communities, none at all. The only potential glimmer for climate change action here is that younger people are more likely to to say that they see climate change as a major threat.
Okay, so this was a fairly wide-ranging poll beyond just climate change, and it dealt with how people also view institutions in this country, like Congress, where these climate laws would be made. What did it find?
Yeah, I mean, institutions are really suffering right now. I mean, Congress has among the lowest ratings we've ever tested. Just 22% said they have some confidence in Congress. The Supreme Court continues to get poor ratings. Even the FBI, which had been so vaunted for so long, has become really split, with people with Republicans not trusting it, Democrats trusting it. And we've seen that there's been all these indictments of former President Trump, who's really been in the middle of all of our politics.
And we have a presidential election coming up. What about politics? How are people viewing the parties and President Biden?
Yeah, I mean, people don't like either party, you know, and President Biden is getting really middling approval ratings, just a 41% approval rating. Somebody's got to win in 2024, even though people don't seem to like President Biden or former President Trump. This spells a lot of volatility, and we shouldn't be surprised by any surprises that come forward in the 2024 election.
NPR's Domenico Montanaro, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
A Florida immigration law forces some businesses to run new employees through an immigration status database. This crackdown on undocumented workers has fueled fears of a Latino exodus from the state, and some Republicans now worry the new law might hurt their party's political fortunes. Here's NPR's Claudia Grisales.
On a steamy summer day in Miami, flea market vendor Bessie Hernandez is doing her best to drum up sales. Avocados from Florida, pineapples from Costa Rica, plantains from Colombia mark a small sampling of the 73-year-old's colorful inventory. For decades, vendors at the Tropicana flea market have worked weekends under the hot sun, listening to music, trading jokes, and good stories. But lately, those stories have turned grim, thanks to a new Florida immigration law that's hurting sales for Hernandez and others.
No viene ningún millonario a un pulguero.
She says no millionaire is coming to a flea market. Rather, her customer base is comprised of people just like her, humble workers who are now leaving the state. Hernandez says it's a tough moment in her 27 years of running her produce stand. In all, she knows 30 Floridians who have moved to other states, and her sales in recent months have dropped 40%. It's a story that's grown all too common for a state economy that's highly reliant on migrants for its tourism, agriculture, and construction industries.
Even a lot of Republican business owners are worried and complaining about this law because they view it as unnecessary and disruptive.
That's former Florida Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo at a recent Miami journalism conference. He and other Republicans argue the law could hurt Governor Ron DeSantis and those down-ballot GOP candidates who would be tied to him.
This is another issue where, Republican candidates try to flex in the primaries, try to prove their conservative credentials, but end up doing damage to themselves in general elections.
Last month, civil rights groups sued the state over the law, which took effect July 1st. And while anecdotal evidence of Latinos leaving Florida is growing, experts say it will take time to see how widespread that impact is. In Washington, Republican members of the Florida congressional delegation, like longtime Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, blame the Biden administration for the new law.
Whatever states are doing is just a sign of how bad and how desperate and how catastrophic the administration has been dealing with, or has not been dealing with, the issue of border security.
But those politics are pretty far removed from the Tropicana flea market.
So we're like struggling because we have to pay the rent and everything.
That's Danny Pareda, a watch repairman in the market. The vendors still face overhead costs, even without money coming in. Combined with the summer's extreme heat driving away even more customers, he says a new immigration law could be a death knell.
Because immigration people are leaving, it's hurting our sales too. That's why it's empty.
Pareda's business is down 80 to 90%. Some Florida Republicans have gone as far as discrediting the law, saying it has no teeth and should not scare migrants away. But only time will tell what impact it could have on the state's economy and population. A pretty important metric for a pretty important political and economic powerhouse. Claudia Grisales, NPR News, Miami.
This is 91.7 WVXU. Coming up on the Marketplace Morning Report, low-wage immigration workers are uniquely vulnerable to wage theft, and the process of getting that money back is complicated, time-intensive, and often doesn't work. You'll hear about a new online platform that aims to make it easier for workers to recoup stolen wages. That's coming up in 10 minutes on 91.7 WVXU. Northbound 7175 at Kyles Lane, there's a broken down vehicle on the right shoulder of the entrance ramp. Southbound 7175 approaching Buttermilk, a broken down vehicle, it's on the right shoulder.
Get connected to the local stories that affect your day. Visit WVXU.org/subscribe to sign up to receive all the latest news and events delivered to your email.
Support comes from listeners like you and from Ohio Living Land Fair, now seeking caring and compassionate professionals for positions in nursing, housekeeping, and culinary. You can discover more about compensation, benefits, flexible scheduling, and how to apply online at ohioliving.org/careers. That's ohioliving.org/careers.
Hello, Cincinnati. This is Jim White, host of 1A, heard weekday mornings at 10 here on 91.7 WVXU. Now, I may have gone to college at that school up north, as you call it, but I understand the importance of Ohio in politics, education, the economy, and yes, even sports. 1A works to cover it all with you, the listener, in mind. Thanks for listening and contributing to the show with your questions and comments. Please email us anytime at 1A@WAMU.org. 9 first morning weather, mostly to partly cloudy today. The high temperature 81, clear, warm tonight, the low 67. Tomorrow, partly cloudy, hot, humid all the way up to 88. 71 now in Cincinnati.
I'm Lucy May. On the next Cincinnati edition, early voting is underway for Ohio's special election on August 8th. Do you still have questions about Issue 1, what it would do, and why various Ohio groups are for or against the measure? We'll have a panel of supporters and opponents to explain their positions and take your questions for a full hour. Today at noon on Cincinnati Edition on 91.7 WVXU.
Good morning. It's 8:45, 71 degrees in Cincinnati. This is 91.7 WVXU. I'm Marianne Selesnik. The Queen City Balladeers started in the 1960s as a cohort of musicians playing protest songs amid the folk revival movement. As the nonprofit group turns 60, WVXU's Frank Joe takes a look at their evolution.
It's the summer of 1963. Rock and roll is in, folk music on its way out. That August at the University of Cincinnati, 7 students come together to try to keep the genre alive. They call themselves the Queen City Balladeers. By the end of the decade, the Balladeers were struggling to find an outdoor venue large enough to host the thousands who showed up to their Friday night shows in Alt Park. Dive into their past performances and you'll get everything from jam sessions with John Denver to protest songs from the Great Depression. When they weren't singing about politics, balladeers were participating in it, protesting the Vietnam War and the heat of the anti-war turn of the 60s and 70s. Over the coming decades, they changed names and moved to the basement of a YMCA before settling into a mansion.
Can you give us some context into how this current time period we're in fits into the history of anti-Semitism in the U.S.? Where are we now versus where we have been?
Historians used to call the period between World War I and World War II the high tide of American anti-Semitism. I am afraid
Take the next left onto Moser Court.
That we might rename that period and call the era we are now living in the high tide of
In 1,000 feet, turn right onto Hamilton Enterprise Park Drive.
American anti-Semitism. That period saw physical attacks upon Jews. It saw the Ku Klux Klan boycott Jewish businesses in Indiana, not just in the South.
Take the next right onto Hamilton Enterprise Park Drive, then continue straight to stay on Hamilton Enterprise Park Drive.
And it was a period when Jews knew that they could be attacked on the streets of cities like Boston and New York. And what do we have today? We see Jews who are Orthodox Jews means you can see what they look like. They dress differently than other people. And
continue straight to stay on Hamilton Enterprise Park Drive.
They're physically attacked on the streets of New York. I'm afraid things haven't changed.
In 400 feet at the traffic circle, take the second exit onto Gilmore Road.
Not much. They've only gotten worse.
What are the politics at play here?
So, for the first time in a...
Exit the traffic circle onto Gilmore Road. Continue on Gilmore Road for 3/4 of a mile.
Really, really long time. American Jews are under attack from both the right and the left. And from the right, there's the potential for terrible violence, like we saw in Pittsburgh when 11 people were massacred at worship. But from the left, we also have anti-Semitism, chiefly construed as anti-Israelism, the notion that Israel has no right to exist, that the Jews have no right to have their own state anywhere in the world. And that has also led to violence, as we saw in May 2021, when Jews were having dinner on a street in Los Angeles.
In a 1/4 mile, turn right onto Princeton Road.
Angeles were attacked, and they're not Israelis, they're American Jews.
What do you most want people to know about this problem right now?
I think the thing that is most important is to understand that, first of all, anti-Semitism is one part of a long history of how...
Turn right onto Princeton Road.
Americans have discriminated against other minorities. And the second thing that I would say is that anti-Semitism in other times and places has been the canary in the coal mine. And that
in 1/2 mile, use the left 2 lanes to turn left onto Ohio 4 Bypass North.
When there is a moment of terrible crisis and anti-Semitism rises, I think we have to worry about what's going to happen next. And I'm not only talking about anti-Semitism and the Jews.
Pamela Nadell is a professor of history and director of the Jewish Studies program at American University. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
After the break, the West grapples with how to handle Moscow's frozen assets.
Hey, Ohio, there are 2 exciting new ways to take on the space...
Use the left 2 lanes to turn left onto Ohio 4 Bypass North.
Invaders, the Ohio Lottery just booted up a cash invasion. And unlike the good old days, these games require a lot less hand-eye coordination. You could blast your way to a high score of up to $10,000 when you play the Space Invaders Cash Invasion Scratch-Off, or up to $20,000 on the new Space Invaders Easy Play game. So head to your favorite Ohio Lottery retailer and get ready to take your shot. No aiming, no dodging, just $2 and loads of nostalgic fun. Lottery players are subject to Ohio laws and commission regulations. Play responsibly.
Welcome back to Axios Today. I'm Nyla Boudou. When Russia first invaded Ukraine last February, the West froze Russian central bank assets worth around $300 billion. Axios business editor Kate Marino is reporting that now Western countries are trying to figure out what to do with those funds and whether they can be used to help rebuild Ukraine. So Kate, it's been more than a year since Russia invaded Ukraine. Why are Western leaders now trying to figure out what to do with these frozen Russian assets?
What was once looked at as kind of a legal impossibility back at the beginning of the invasion, people are now starting to say, wait a minute, this has gone on longer than we expected. We've seen atrocities piling up. We've seen the cost of the expected reconstruction growing and growing. The World Bank actually estimates that as of now it's over $400 billion. So that has really started to have people who
continue on Ohio 4 Bypass North for 1 mile.
Think about these kinds of legal issues, say, we've got to figure out something. We've got, between the U.S. and its allies, about $300 billion worth of Russian central bank assets that were frozen. You know, at this point, politically and in popular opinion, like, there's just no way that they think they could give them back to Russia at some later date. They just feel like it needs to be funneled into Ukraine's reconstruction somehow, some way.
So Congress has actually pitched bills that would make this happen?
There are a few bills out there, one in particular that people seem to be the most focused on, one that was introduced with a handful of bipartisan sponsors. It basically just gives the president the authority to confiscate the assets held in the U.S. and transfer them to the benefit of Ukraine.
that would take care of one part of the legal obstacle.
In a quarter mile, turn right onto Ohio 4 North.
Because it appears to be illegal domestically, but also illegal under international law. So this bill would take care of the domestic part. But the elephant in the room is that most of the assets are actually sitting in Europe.
And what is the thinking in Europe about all of this right now?
Over the last couple months, EU leaders got together and were speaking about an idea whereby
turn right onto Ohio 4 North.
They would use some of the interest income generated by the Russian central bank assets, or they would invest the assets.
Continue on Ohio 4 North for 8 miles.
And only use the investment gains and send those to Ukraine. The downside to that is that's just not that much money compared to the scale of what Ukraine needs, and it still leaves $300 billion sitting there that people want to deploy over to Ukraine.
Kate, legally, is this even possible to do?
The important thing to know is that central bank assets have just always been viewed as pretty untouchable under international law. And this has to do with complicated legal concepts like sovereign immunity and state property rights. A lot of people that I've spoken with have said the vibes out there have changed from this is impossible, we can't do this, to okay, we've got to figure out a way to do this. That doesn't mean anyone has the answer to how they're going to do it legally, but the vibes have shifted a little bit in the way people are thinking about it.
Kate Marino is a business editor for Axios. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
One last headline for you today. A new study caught our eye that says about half of the world's population can expect to develop at least one type of mental disorder by the time they're 75 years old. The study was published in the scientific journal The Lancet Psychiatry and showed major depression and anxiety to be the most common disorders. The study also found differences between men and women. For example, for men, alcohol abuse is more likely, while more women suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's it for us today. As a reminder, we're running a listener survey to get to know you better and keep improving Axios Today. We'd really love your feedback. Plus, you'll be entered to win a $50 Amazon gift card. You can find a link to the survey in our show notes. I'm Nyla Boodoo. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
LinkedIn presents.
Hey everyone, producer Caleb here. Rufus is off this week, so we're bringing you one of our favorite episodes from the archives. It's a conversation he had with Dr. Anna Lembke. She's a professor at Stanford University School of Medicine and author of the New York Times bestseller, Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. Before we get into it though, a quick reminder that you can always listen to episodes of this show ad-free by downloading the Next Big Idea app. There you will also find hundreds upon hundreds of book summaries written and read by the biggest thinkers in the world. I'm talking about folks like Adam Grant, Daniel Pink, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and many more. Download the Next Big Idea app right now. Also, just want to do a super fast plug for our daily show, the Next Big Idea Daily. This week, host Michael Kovnat is sharing decision-making advice from fighter pilots, poker players, and business school professors. Follow the Next Big Idea Daily wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, let's hear Rufus's conversation with Dr. Anna Lembke.
I'm Rufus Griscom, and this is the Next Big Idea. Today, finding balance in an age of overindulgence. Never thought she'd become an addict.
I really don't care for alcohol. It doesn't do much for me. Caffeine doesn't wake me up. I'm not a big food person. Food has been sort of fuel for me my whole life, never particularly reinforcing.
That abstemious nature makes sense given what Anna does for a living. She's one of the world's foremost experts on addiction. After getting her MD from Stanford, she went on to become the university's medical director of addiction medicine. If anyone had a vested interest in temperance, it was her.
But, I discovered a drug in life that was highly reinforcing, and that was...
His arms wrapped around me, holding me against him.
variant of the novel.
It felt like every nerve ending in my body was a live wire.
I really got hooked on romance novels in my 40s, which was really quite strange.
Forever, he agreed, and then pulled us gently into deeper water.
Twilight was her gateway drug. After she finished that series, she tore through every vampire romance she could find. Then she moved on to werewolves, fairies, fortune tellers, and necromancers. She got a Kindle, so the next book, her next fix, was just a click away. She stayed up late into the night binge reading. She knew the books were terrible. This is, after all, a woman with a BA in humanities from Yale. But she didn't care. She started taking her Kindle to work, and in between patients, when she should have been taking notes, she was reading graphic, erotic renditions of the boy meets girl fantasy. She was obsessed with that moment when the sexual tension breaks and the hero and heroine hook up. Reading about it was a rush, and soon she was craving that rush all the time.
I took a book to a party once and hid in a room and read during the party.
Finally, after about a year, she was lying in bed at 2 in the morning on a weeknight reading 50 Shades of Grey. She justified this late-night binge by telling herself the book was better than it got credit for being, a modern-day version of Pride and Prejudice. But then she turned to the next page, and it was all about butt plugs. At that moment, something clicked for Anna. She asked herself, is this really how you want to spend your time? The answer, of course, was no. She got rid of her Kindle, took a break from romance fiction, and pretty soon, she felt a lot better. Now, needless to say, compared with a lot of addictions, Anna's was relatively trivial. She wasn't at risk of bankruptcy or overdose. She wasn't putting other people in danger. But that's exactly what makes it such an important example. Over the course of her 20-year career, Anna has found that it doesn't matter whether your drug of choice is drinking wine or shooting heroin, shopping on Amazon, or shocking yourself with a masturbation machine, or maybe just reading Twilight. They all have the same effect on your brain. They lead to the release of dopamine, which makes you feel good. And the more you crave that good feeling, the more all-consuming your pursuit of it becomes. That neurochemical phenomenon served us well for millennia. It encouraged us to seek out food, find shelter, and procreate, and it discouraged us from experiencing pain and risking death. The problem today, though, is that there are so many things that make us feel good, and it's so easy for us to access them, that we all, in one realm or another, are like Anna. If we're not addicted to romance novels, then we're addicted to work, or our phones, or Netflix. So here's the big question. How do we navigate a world of superabundance without developing addictions? Fortunately, Anna Lemke has thought a lot about this, and she offers some surprising answers in her new book, Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. It's essential reading for anyone who has a dopamine reward pathway, which is to say, all of us.
Podcast, The Path. Discover how today's greatest leaders shape their unique career paths and the lessons they learned along the way. Tune into new episodes weekly starting August 8th, wherever you enjoy your podcasts.
Anna Lemke, welcome to the Next Big Idea podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, Anna, you spent your career helping people with addictions, and we get to know in your book some of the extraordinary patients that you have helped. Just wonderful human beings, colorful and heroic. You refer to them as your heroes. And not only are they inspirational, but they're kind of dramatized versions of all of us, right? I mean, you quote the philosopher Kent Dunnington, who wrote, "People with severe addictions are among those contemporary prophets that we ignore to our own demise, for they show us who we truly are." So,
in half a mile, turn left onto Lafayette Avenue.
This is not just a book for people who are concerned about addiction. It's really a book for everyone that has a dopamine reward pathway, which is to say all of us.
Exactly. Yeah, you said that very well. This is really a book meant for the average person who's wondering about how to live the good life in a dopamine overloaded world. And I do hold out.
Take the next left onto Lafayette Avenue.
My patients and people in recovery from severe addictions as modern day prophets for the rest of us, for how to navigate this overabundant ecosystem that we find ourselves in.
Before we start with big idea number one about the pleasure-pain balance, I think it could be useful if you could share just a simple definition of what exactly dopamine is. We've all heard of it, but I'm not sure all listeners understand what it is and how it works.
Dopamine is a chemical that our brain makes. It has
In a quarter mile, your destination will be on the left.
several different functions in the brain, but one of the most important functions is that it mediates the experience of pleasure, reward, and motivation. Typically, when we do something that's reinforcing or pleasurable, our brain will release dopamine in a part of the brain called the reward pathway. And the more reinforcing and more pleasurable something is, the more dopamine gets released in that part of the brain. So dopamine is very much a signal that alerts us to what is going on in our bodies, in the environment, and it's a way that we are encouraged to approach pleasure and avoid.
Your destination is on the left.
Pain, which is precisely what has kept us alive through millions of years of evolution in a world of scarcity and ever-present danger.
Well, that brings us to your first big idea, which is about the surprising relationship between pleasure and pain.
In 1,000 feet, turn right onto 18th Avenue.
One of the most important discoveries in the field of neuroscience in the past 100 years is that pleasure and pain are co-located. By that I mean the same parts of the brain that
Take the next right onto 18th Avenue.
Process pleasure also process pain. And pleasure and pain work like a balance. When we feel pleasure, the balance tips one way.
In a quarter mile, turn right onto Minnesota Street. In a quarter mile, turn right onto 14th Avenue.
When we feel pain, it tips the other. One of the overarching rules governing this balance is that it wants to stay level.
Take the second right onto 14th Avenue, then turn right.
Any deviation from neutrality, our brains will work very hard to restore a level balance, or what neuroscientists call homeostasis.
In a quarter mile, turn right onto 10th Avenue.
For example, I like to watch YouTube videos of American Idol, and when I watch, my brain releases a little bit of the neurotransmitter dopamine in my brain's reward pathway, and my balance tips slightly to the side of pleasure. But no sooner has that happened than my brain adapts to the increased dopamine by down-regulating my own dopamine receptors and dopamine transmission.
Turn right onto 10th Avenue, then turn right.
I like to imagine this as little gremlins hopping on the pain side of my balance to bring it level.
Turn left onto Windsor Avenue, then turn left onto Maple Street. Take the next left onto 9th Avenue, then turn left onto Maple Street. Take the next right onto 8th Avenue.
Again, not very scientific, I know. But here's the thing about those gremlins.
In 1,000 feet, turn right onto 5th Avenue.
They like it on the balance, so they don't hop off once it's level. They stay on until it has tipped an equal and opposite amount to the side of pain.
Take the next right onto 5th Avenue.
This is the after effect, the hangover, the come down, or in my case, that moment.
Take the next right onto 4th Avenue, then turn right onto Yankee Road.
To wanting to watch just one more video.
In 800 feet, sharp right onto Yankee Road.
Wait long enough, the gremlins hop off balance, neutrality is restored, and that feeling passes. But what if I don't?
Take the next right onto Yankee Road.
Wait. What if instead I watch another video, and another, and pretty soon, I'm no longer watching American Idol YouTube videos. I'm watching YouTube videos of people watching YouTube videos, alternating with memes of Dr. Pimple Popper. Now, if I keep doing this for hours a day, days to weeks, weeks to month, I end up with enough gremlins on the pain side of my balance to
turn right onto 2nd Avenue. In 1,000 feet, turn right onto Central Avenue.
Fill a whole room. They're camped out for the long haul, tents and barbecues in tow. Once that happens, I've changed my joy.
Take the next right onto Central Avenue.
At a set point, I need to keep watching YouTube videos not to feel pleasure, but just to feel normal. And as soon as I stop watching, I experience the universal symptoms of withdrawal from any addictive substance. Anxiety, irritability, insomnia, dysphoria, and mental preoccupation with using, otherwise known as craving. This is the hallmark of the addicted brain.
So Anna, I have to ask you, who the heck is Dr. Pimple Popper, and why are you watching these videos?
You haven't watched any of Dr. Pimple Popper's videos? Okay, now I'm really embarrassed. These are videos of a dermatologist, I think she's a dermatologist, just popping people's pimples large and small. I really don't want to go into any kind of psychoanalytic analysis of why they're appealing to me, but they are. I also like to watch videos of podiatrists shaving away people's calluses and corns. Again,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, weird, right? But I can literally watch those for hours, just one after another. It's very,
oh my gosh,
very strange.
Well,
yeah,
you're not alone, because I actually did look it up. I had to look it up, of course. And your addiction's a contagion. These are not small pimples we're talking about here, and you're not alone. Dr. Pimple Popper has 7.3 million subscribers.
Right.
So clearly there's a pleasure pain threshold clearly with the popping of pimples. So there's more to get into there.
Yeah.
This basic situation of these gremlins you described, maintaining the pleasure-pain balance or the hedonic set point, gosh, it feels like a dire state of affairs. It's a little bit of a cruel trick, right? I mean, like we find a source of pleasure, and it's almost immediately counterbalanced with pain.
Yeah.
And if you continue to tap the pleasure bar too many times, our experience of the pleasure erodes, and we're building, if I understand correctly, a kind of mounting debt of pain and discontent.
Yes.
You know, and it feels almost like a neurochemical explanation for our inherent discontent as a species, which I think poets and writers and philosophers have known for generations, that we are to some degree a discontented species, and it's probably not by accident.
Right.
But this explains what's happening neurochemically.
Yeah, exactly. It gives a neuroscience frame for why we are the ultimate seekers, never satisfied with what we have, always looking for more. And again, you know, it's what has kept us alive and really dominant as a species for so many millions of years. But it turns out to be a real bummer if you've transformed the world to one of overwhelming overabundance. Now, you know, we've got so many feel-good drugs and behaviors just at the touch of a finger, that we've all kind of, like, our whole existence is sort of fetishized now, and it's really strange.
It certainly is. And yes.
We can all agree on that.
Absolutely. And it's strange and getting stranger, which we'll get into. But yeah, no, it seems like our deeply satisfied humans that lived in our ancestral environment, that were happy to work on their suntans, those ones were eaten by saber-toothed tigers.
Right.
And we were descended from the discontented ones who were never totally happy, or not for long.
Right. That certainly describes me very well.
Yeah.
trying to do?
Legislators to help them grant this $1.1 billion. Thirdly, Citizens United for Fair Districting put in a ballot initiative. The Supreme Court basically did not allow equal representation in this state, and we're the most gerrymandered, misrepresented state.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm so sorry. We ran out of time. I'm sorry we didn't get to finish. I have been talking with Ohio Senator Rob McCulley, a Republican representing Ohio Senate District 1 who supports Issue 1, former editor and associate publisher of the Columbus Dispatch and former two-term member of the Ohio House of Representatives, Mike Curtin, who opposes Issue 1, Ohio Farm Bureau Senior Director for State and National Policy, Brandon Kern, who supports Issue 1, and League of Women Voters of Ohio Executive Director Jen Miller, who opposes Issue 1. Thank you all so much for your time today. Election Day in Ohio is August 8th, and early voting continues over the next few days. You can check on your polling place and find information about early voting on your County Board of Elections website. You've been listening to Cincinnati Edition on 91.7 WVXU. I'm Lucy May. Thanks for listening. I'm Lucy May. On the next Cincinnati Edition, a violation of the Hatch Act? The Libertarian Party of Ohio accuses Frank LaRose of violating federal law. We'll take a look at their complaint. Plus, there's uncertainty surrounding the latest legal battle over abortion. A ban is on hold in Indiana again. The Weekly News Review, Friday at noon on Cincinnati Edition on 91.7 WVXU.
Today Explained at 3:30, last autumn, the Biden administration instituted a blockade against China. The U.S. will no longer export chip components for semiconductors to its economic rival. Coming up on Today Explained, the brewing war over a little thing that's in everything semiconductors.
Support for WVXU programming comes from the Murray and Agnes Seasongood Good Government Foundation, dedicated to professional management through the council manager form of government. Support comes from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine and UC Physicians. From innovative treatments for brain tumors to the most complex spinal and brain surgeries, their physician scientists strive to bring the highest level neurosurgical care to Cincinnati. Learn more at med.uc.edu/indispensable.
91.7 WVXU Cincinnati and 88.5 WMUB Oxford. News from Cincinnati Public Radio and NPR.
From WHYY in Philadelphia, I'm Terry Gross with Fresh Air. Today, how do you get on with life after an accident that leads to disability and flames of chronic pain? That's the central question in Andre Dubus III's new novel. Today we talk with him about the book, the injuries he faced when he was a carpenter, and how his relationship changed with his father, the writer Andre Dubus, after the senior Dubus was struck by a car and never walked again. Andre Dubus III will also tell us how he grew up poor and bullied. When he decided to stop hiding, he built up his body and became a fighter, which led to other problems. Dubus's new novel is called Such Kindness. He also wrote the best-selling novel House of Sand and Fog and the memoir Townie. First news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Former President Donald Trump's being arraigned this afternoon in federal court in Washington, D.C. He is charged with attempting to overturn his loss in the 2020 election and in the ensuing weeks encouraging what would become the violent insurrection at the U.S. Capitol that led to multiple deaths and put many more lives at risk. Trump is expected to plead not guilty. The embattled Republican maintains he is the victim of a political witch hunt. Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi says a bipartisan House panel brought to light enormous amounts of testimony, video, and other evidence that support their argument that Trump put the democratic process at risk to serve himself.
Our evidence, beyond a shadow of a doubt, said from the Attorney General on down, they indicated, they told the president, you lost in America. We need to prepare for the transition, the peaceful transition of power. And former President Trump did not do it.
Thompson speaking with NPR's Morning Edition. Ethnically motivated attacks, sexual violence, and the deliberate targeting of civilians. are some of the human rights violations recorded in Sudan since war broke out there. That is according to a report out today from Amnesty International. Kate Bartlett reports the Human Rights Watchdog says some of the violations amount to war crimes.
Unimaginable horror. That's how Amnesty International described what's been happening in Sudan since fighting broke out in April between the government and a paramilitary group. Drawing on interviews with almost 200 people, many of them refugees who fled the conflict, Amnesty documented how doctors and other civilians had been targeted in the capital, Khartoum. Meanwhile, in the West Darfur region, the war has taken on an ethnic component similar to the previous conflict, the group said. Scores of women, including girls as young as 12, have been sexually assaulted by members of the warring factions, it added. For NPR News, I'm Kate Bartlett in Johannesburg.
July was the hottest month on record. Human-caused climate change fueling the rising temperatures, but there's been little action from Congress. NPR's Domenico Montanaro reports that a new NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll reveals why.
A majority of Americans say climate change is an immediate threat and it's affecting their communities now. But that's not the case for Republicans. 3/4 of Republican respondents say to prioritize the economy even if it means ignoring climate change. And 80% say climate change will only represent a minor threat in the future or none at all. With majorities in Congress as narrow as they are, there has to be cooperation from both sides to get something meaningful done. But this poll shows a large segment of the electorate turning away from the climate crisis, even as it gets worse. Domenico Montanaro, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR News. In Australia, at the Women's World Cup, Germany is out after managing only a draw in its final group game against South Korea. NPR's Rob Schmitz reports from Berlin. German fans could not be more disappointed.
One German news site called it the biggest disgrace in team history. Germany, a two-time World Cup champion in 2003 and 2007, is officially out of the tournament phase of the Women's World Cup, finishing third in its group behind Morocco and Colombia, who will both move forward in the tournament. This is familiar territory for Germany, a soccer-obsessed nation which saw its men's team lose out in the group round of last year's World Cup. That ouster led the president of the German Football Association to launch a series of inquiries into the development of the national team since 2018, when its performance began to slide, failing to live up to its previous reputation of one of the best World Cup teams on the planet. Rob Schmitz, NPR News, Berlin.
Fans of the legendary group Queen will have a chance to view many of the items that led to some of the band's biggest hits. A free exhibition is being held at Sotheby's London ahead of auction. More than 1,400 of the late singer Freddie Mercury's personal items include handwritten drafts of the famous Bohemian Rhapsody and the baby grand piano he used to compose Queen's most enduring hits. The collection was left to Mercury's close friend Mary Austin. U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Dow is up 28, S&P is up 2 points, the Nasdaq has risen 50 points. I'm Lakshmi Singh, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, a hiring platform designed to streamline the hiring process. Indeed works to help businesses attract, interview, and hire candidates in one place. More at Indeed.com/NPR.
What, if anything, distinguishes human thought and emotion from a computer's operation?
Brain science gets most of the building, most of the money, and any glory that's going. Neurobiology. It's king, queen, ugly sisters, and golden coach. We don't do brains. We do minds.
The Hard Problem by Tom Stoppard. Next time on LA Theater Works.
Saturday evening at 8 on WVXU and WMUB.
This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. An accident that causes a severe injury and disability changes a life in an instant, and the chronic pain can last for the rest of your life. So how do you carry on? That's the central question in the new novel by my guest Andre Dubus III. The main character, Tom, is a builder who falls off a roof, breaking his pelvis and hips. Those bones are held together by pins, and long after the fall, the fires around the pins are still raging. He's on disability, living in Section 8 subsidized housing, thinking he doesn't belong here. He doesn't belong with these people.
The psychic pain, spiritual void, and the anger and bitterness are constants. Dubusse had personal experiences he could draw from for the novel. His father, the writer Andre Dubusse, had his life changed while trying to do a good deed helping two people on the side of the road who had collided with an overturned motorcycle in the passing lane. While helping them, he was hit by a car going over 55 miles an hour. One leg was amputated, and the other was virtually paralyzed. He never walked again. Andre Dubusse III grew up poor because his parents separated long before his father's accident, leaving his mother sometimes unable to pay the rent or buy enough food to feed herself and 4 children, in spite of the child support payments. Andre Dubusse III learned what it was like to have money after his novel House of Sand and Fog became an Oprah Book Club selection, a bestseller, and was adapted into a film. He has a forthcoming collection of essays called Ghost Dogs on killers and kin. His new novel is called Such Kindness. Andre Dubusse, welcome back to Fresh Air. Let's start with a very short reading from early in your book, on page 15.
Okay. I have spent many hours contemplating pain. Its constant presence seems like such a dark joke, really. Like the school bully who sits on your chest and spits in your face years after both of you have moved on. My pelvis and hips were fractured years ago. Do they have to keep spitting in my face?
I was wondering if you were thinking of your father and his accident when you decided to write a book about a horrible injury that leads to disability and chronic pain.
No, it's interesting. I wasn't consciously thinking about my dad, Terry, but of course these things are in my psyche deeply. I've had a lot of back injuries, like a lot of people over the years. I've been laid up for a week or two at a time with that kind of pain that makes it hard to even go to the bathroom and get out of bed to go to the bathroom. I think I was drawing more on my own bouts of severe pain. And then, of course, the question was, what about people who are never free of it? How do you get through a day and a week? But I think you're right. I hadn't thought of it consciously, but how could that not be part of my psyche? I watched my dad in pain for at least 2 straight years. He was in really hard daily pain after that accident.
So your injuries were caused by being a carpenter, because you're a carpenter. And you draw on that for the book, too.
Yeah. It first started at 19, weight training, and I write about all that in my memoir, Townie, about how I transformed myself from a small, sedentary, scared, bullied kid into somebody with some muscles and some fighting skills. And I worked out 4, 5, 6 hours a day. I was insanely possessed to change my life. And I hurt myself badly. I wore a brace for a year, and a back brace. And then, over the years, I would re-injure it mainly doing carpentry work, you're right. And I just hurt it again last year and was laid up for a couple of weeks. I got some reading and writing done, but it hurt like hell.
There are so many descriptions of the pain in the book. Because the pain is constant, you're constantly, as a reader, reminded of it.
Yeah, I worry about that.
No, but you had to come up with a lot of different descriptions. So what was the process like of coming up with different descriptions to describe the same pain in his hip?
Well, I love this line by the writer Paul Engel. He said that writing is rewriting what you've already rewritten.
This is endless.
Isn't that great? It's friggin' endless. I began with a horrible metaphor of rats gnashing at his pelvis and his hip bones. And I think the first few drafts, even the ones I was working on with my editor at Norton, were with the rat in the pelvis. And it was turning everybody off, and I thought it was effective, but then it became too loud. It was like too loud of an instrument in the band. And I revised it and said, well, that's not accurate. I was just really doing something over the top there. And then I remembered my own pain, and it felt more like a fire. It felt more like a flame. And so then, it's about revising to, hopefully, to greater truth, if you can. And so then the flames came in. But every time, I was worried about the reader. Oh, Jesus. I'm asking the reader to sit through a lot for the first part of this book. Not just the physical pain, but, of course, the poverty and the depression and the despair. And so it was, I'm just taking a gamble that on.
You know, your memoir, Townie, starts with you jogging with your father before his accident.
Yeah.
And at this point in your story, in the memoir, your parents are separated, you're living with your mother, but your father visits usually once a week, and on this visit, you're going jogging with him. But you don't have good sneakers, so you borrow your older sister's sneakers, but they're really too small. And you run 2 5.5-mile laps with your father. Your feet are like swollen and bleeding, and they really hurt. And so I thought it was interesting that that memoir starts with pain too, with physical pain.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that, and the memoir begins with that because that's when I really began. Yeah, I'd run only once in my life. I was 8 years old when my dad lived with us, and I ran 2 miles with him. And now it's 8 years later. I'm 16. I'm lifting weights. I'm not in aerobic shape. Yeah, and I'm wearing these shoes 2 sizes too small, and I'm in agony just walking to the trail. And yeah, so we ended up running 11 miles, and I was hobbling the last few. But it opens the book because there's something about me and my relationship to physical pain that's probably not healthy. But it felt as if I was purging the small, weak, sedentary, cowardly boy I'd been with physical agony. And it's something that I still do 40, 50 years later. There's still a part of me that does workouts long and hard to purge and to cleanse and to forge. And but that's not Tom Lowe's pain. His is different.
Tom, your character, turns to the Hermann Hesse novel Siddhartha, which is like a Buddhist-oriented novel. Your father, after his injury and his chronic pain, he kept reading the New Testament. And you said you don't believe in God, but you do believe in the divine. So what's the distinction there? And has your belief in the divine, however you define it, help you get through difficult periods?
Boy, that's a great question. I teach my dad's short stories at University of Massachusetts Lowell, where I've been for years, and I just so love teaching his work. But one of the things that I see now, especially as a guy who got to be older than he ever got, is that his art would not exist without his Catholic faith, his Christian faith, more than Catholic faith. It suffuses his whole vision of the world. And I think when I look at my work, I see that there is no faith. There is no religious belief. None of that happened for me. I've never believed that there's a God who knows my name and loves me. I, to this day, do not believe that. I do believe, however, that there is something quite beautiful and mysterious and, yes, divine in and around all human beings at all times. And maybe it's just love. And I think about that, I think it's the Buddhist tradition, namaste, the divine in me bows to the divine in you. That really speaks to me. I find that every human being who crosses my path exudes something really beautiful. And I do believe in that.
Has it been hard for you to find language, everyday language, to describe your belief in the divine, but not in God? Like Tom, your main character, for instance, he says he's talking to a God he doesn't believe in. He uses the word blessing, and he says, another holy word that I don't believe in, but do. So he's struggling with the language.
Yeah, I am too. It's hard to find the language. I don't know. It's going to sound romanticized, but you've got to come down to love. It's love. And I did not look at the world with rose-colored lenses. I walk around with one psychic fist up, waiting for bad behavior and trying to find a way to deal with it without plummeting into the violence I used to know so well. But I think the beginning of my walk down that road, Terry, to all of this came from 2 places. One is the birth of our 3 children, Austin, Ariadne, and Elias. And the second is daily creative writing, the practice of creative writing. I discovered a couple years into my writing life that I had been a fundamentalist, meaning I had been looking at the world in black and white, no undertones, no overtones. A man punches a woman in the face, kill him. he's a bad man, execute him. That was how I felt for years. I still, of course, despise male violence against women and kids. But I've learned, and this sounds like bumper sticker Christianity, I'm no Christian. I do not have a religious faith, although I respect those who do. But, you know, hate the sin, not the sinner. You know, my most recent novel, Before Such Kindness, is called Gone So Long, and it's from the point of view of a man who murdered his wife. I wanted nothing to do with trying to write that story, but it really felt like it was coming to me through my subconscious as a test. Well, let's see how far you can go with this, buddy, with this whole love one another thing.
Hi, welcome to Burger King, where the guest rules. One of our friendly team members will be with you shortly. And don't forget, you rule! You can have the order.
Alright, I'll take a Whopper Jr., just the sandwich.
You want cheese on it?
No thanks.
Alright.
And a bacon cheeseburger.
Okay.
And a value fries and a medium onion rings.
We're actually out of onion rings, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'll just take a value fries.
Okay.
That's all.
$7.47 is the second window.
Thanks. Thanks. You too. Try to find a shady spot and eat some lunch. I think I know the spot.
horrible things. Certainly they've all killed people. And before we started talking about writing, I stood up and said, I just want you guys to know I could have been here. I don't judge you. I'm not here to judge what you did. That's your business. I can tell you that I came this close many times to doing life in prison myself, and I'm not here standing above you. I'm here to talk to you in brotherhood about creative writing and going deeper into the human spirit of words. But as I said that, it's true, and you know, I've done some research for projects in prisons. I've met a lot of inmates in prisons. I've also done some creative writing teaching in county jails, and I never feel apart from them. I always identify with all of them. I said, man, I was one more kick in the head from being where you are. So anyway, I walked through my life, Terry, with such gratitude, day and night.
I just want to repeat something that you just said, that you think of writing as going deeper into the human spirit through words. That's a pretty great description.
Well, thank you. You know, I am so grateful that I found writing. You know, it was rocky for the first 10 or 20 years being the great writer's son with the same name. It was a pain in the ass, but I am so grateful to where writing has taken me. And, you know, the writing of fiction for me is just a daily act of sustained empathy, where you're asking, what's it like to be you? What's it like to be in your situation? And there's no way you can begin to enter into the spirit of this sacred being called a character without authentic curiosity. You know, Rumi has this wonderful line. He says, sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. And so I've been writing all my adult life, which is a long time now, and every morning I have to strip away my ego. I have to let go of what I want to say and how I want to say it. I have to empty myself and step into whoever is on the page, and it's wonderfully humbling.
Let's take a short break here. If you're just joining us, my guest is Andre Dubus. His new novel is called Such Kindness. We're also talking about his 2011 memoir, which is called Townie. We'll be right back after a short break. This is Fresh Air.
August 6th marks the grim anniversary of the day the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan. It ended World War II, but ushered in the nuclear age that has haunted humanity ever since. Humankind presents Facing the Unthinkable, 1-hour special airing at 7 p.m. on Sunday, August 6th on 91.7 WVHU.
I started reading my book. We read next to each other for about an hour, and then I got up to go to the cafe car, and I said probably the most Canadian thing I've ever said in my life. I pointed out the window and I was like, would you like my window seat? There's a beaver lodge out there.
Join us for stories of journeys, great and small. That's next time on the Moth Radio Hour from PRX.
Sunday nights at 8 and Thursday nights at 11 on 91.7 WVXU.
Support for WVXU comes from Kentucky Proud and farmers markets across the Commonwealth. Kentucky Proud farmers markets provide food and many other products grown and raised with pride on Kentucky farms. More information on local farmers market locations is at kyproud.com/farmersmarkets. That's kyproud.com/farmersmarkets.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of any size to attract, interview, and hire candidates all from one place. More at Indeed.com/NPR. And from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
This is Fresh Air. Let's get back to my interview with Andre Dubus. His new novel is called Such Kindness. He's also the author of an earlier memoir called Townie. When you became a writer, did it bring you closer to your father when you started being a writer and wanted to think of yourself as a writer?
I think it did. I think there were a few things that brought us closer. One was when I became a father, a husband. It's interesting, he had a hard time staying married. He had a few families, but he really respected the roles of a father and a husband. And he saw that I was working hard at those roles. But it was late. I kicked myself, Terry, because I didn't ask him any writing questions. I lied my way on the construction site when I was right out of college and said I was a carpenter. I didn't even know how to read a tape. I don't know how long I thought that charade would last. So I've always been a do-it-yourself, teach-myself kind of guy. So I didn't go to my dad enough. I remember I called him once when I was about in my 30s. I had read a line of dialogue, and the line was, "I didn't do nothing, comma, I don't know nothing." And I called the old man and said, "Can you put a comma between two complete sentences?" He said, "Well, yes, son, it's called a comma splice." I said, "You English majors, I didn't know that." And but he died young, and 62, and I wished I'd spent more time talking to him about writing. But I think knowing that we were both down the same road, it did bring us closer. It certainly did. And now I have that experience with my two grown sons, Austin and Elias, who are both very serious writers. It's really such a joy.
It's really hard, I would imagine, to write about family if the family member is alive, or to write about a close friend if the close friend is alive, and to do it through memoir or essay and not fiction.
Yeah.
Because there's no deniability in memoir or essay. You can't say, it's not you, it's just this character. I just made it up.
Right.
But your father told you, don't be like me and wait until your father is dead to write about him. You can write about your parents while they're alive. Did you take that advice?
No, I waited till he died. But not purposely. I did write a story, one of the first short stories I ever wrote. Probably the most autobiographically based piece of fiction I ever wrote. It's called Wolves in the Marsh, and it was about, I captured the moment my father drove away from our rented house in the New Hampshire woods, my mother crying inside the house like she's being stabbed, we four kids walking our father to his packed car, him driving away, and this image is in tally because it's from my memory and from my life, and my little brother Jeb, who was 7 or 8 then, chasing my father, throwing rocks at the car, yelling, you bum, and we're all crying. And I wrote a short story about that, and I left out the you bum, because at that point I'd forgotten it. And my father reads the story, and he calls me up and says, "Hey, when I said the stuff you could write about me before we're dead, I didn't mean right away." he said, "And by the way, Jeb was throwing rocks and calling me a bum. You didn't put that in, did you?" I said, "Oh man, I forgot about that." But I put it in Townie. I don't know if I could have written Townie, my memoir, if my father had been alive. And I'll tell you why. And this didn't occur to me until years after even publishing that book. And that is this. For years, my mother would say to my father, "Oh, I wish we could have done more for the kids when they're growing up." My father would get defensive. And I want to make it very clear, we were a member of the educated working poor. My father was making $7,000 a year as a full-time faculty member in the 60s. When he retired from this college in the late 80s, he was only making $20,000 a year. My mom never made more than $12,000 a year. They had 4 kids. We just didn't have much. But he was very defensive about that. He would give his child support. It would be most of his check. He lived on very little, but it wasn't enough across the river where we lived, and so he would get defensive. And over the years, I would see this and think, okay, my dad and I are close now, we're buddies. He's too sensitive, too smart. I gotta tell him, come on, man, you gotta tell him, I gotta let you know, it was hard over there in those neighborhoods. It was hard on the other side of that river in that town. And you're too beautiful of an artist to be blind to this. And just as I was getting up my nerve to have that talk with him, he got run over. And I didn't want to...
roundabout.
It's 5:33 and 88 degrees in Cincinnati. This is 91.7 WVXU. I'm Bill Reinhardt. Advocates argue politics can influence police and fire department hiring, promotion, and disciplinary decisions when elected local officials have exclusive control over personnel. Some Indiana communities put those decisions in the hands of a merit board to make the process fairer. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Adam Yahares reports a new law will soon push more Indiana communities to adopt such boards.
Merit boards can have 5 members, 2 selected by police or fire department staff, and 3 selected by elected officials. The new law directs departments with at least 12 full-time staff serving areas of at least 20,000 people to adopt a merit board by 2025. Stephen Arusa of the Indiana Fire Chiefs Association told lawmakers merit boards ensure qualified people are hired and promoted.
Having worked on a department whose chief didn't have the basic officer certification and experience in line of duty death, I can tell you it makes a difference.
Some lawmakers and the state's Association of Cities and Towns opposed the law, arguing it infringes on local control. The new law does allow communities to opt out of a merit board, but it is not only up to elected officials. A majority of the local police or fire department staff have to vote to opt out too. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Adam Yahares.
Some communities around the country are reporting an increase in hospitalizations due to COVID. Franklin and Cuyahoga counties in Ohio and Jefferson County in Kentucky are among them. Counties around Cincinnati are not seeing much of a rise. Hamilton County Public Health spokesman Mike Zamet says an increase is to be expected.
You know, we're seeing a slight uptick. It's not horrendous at this point, but I guess the message here is that COVID is still with us. Vaccines are still available, and all the precautions that we've taken in the past are still valid.
Since July 1st, 24 people in Hamilton County have been hospitalized with COVID. There's been 1 death in the county during that time. Maybe you've noticed the misspelled highway sign on I-74. Exit 14 spells Cheviot, C-H-E-V-O-I-T, and not C-H-E-V-I-O-T. ODOT says they know about it and they plan to fix it in the next few weeks. It was installed July 20th. ODOT says the misspelling was in the design or the work order submitted to the contractor. It's 88 degrees.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Your Part-Time Controller, specializing in nonprofit accounting. Your Part-Time Controller helps nonprofit organizations, including foundations, with their accounting needs. More at yourparttimecontroller.com. And from Procter & Gamble, maker of Nervive Nerve Relief. Nervive is designed to reduce occasional nerve aches, weakness, and discomfort in hands or feet due to aging. Learn more at nervivehealth.com. This is NPR.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Elsa Chang in Culver City, California.
And I'm Sasha Pfeiffer in Washington. The latest charges against former President Donald Trump hinge on how his claims of a stolen election may have been the basis for criminal conduct. That case will be decided in a federal court of law. The Trump era has been defined by his repeated false and baseless claims, and many scholars of political and historical trends say these tactics resemble what has often played out in authoritarian regimes. NPR's domestic extremism correspondent, Odette Youssef, has been reporting this. Hi, Odette. Hi there. So tell us what these charges allege in terms of what prosecutors say he was lying about.
So the indictment alleges that there were 3 criminal conspiracies. One was to defraud the U.S. by using lies to subvert or overturn the election results. Another was to obstruct and impede the certification of votes. And then the last is a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. The document says each of those conspiracies, quote, built on the widespread mistrust the defendant was creating through pervasive and destabilizing lies about election fraud. And Sasha, the indictment details allegations about Trump and or his co-conspirators lying to the American